Yes, guys, what's happening? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to this afternoon's live stream for the preview and predicted lineup for Southampton versus Chelsea in the Premier League. And this game has taken on added importance now, with the Blues having recorded back-to-back defeats in the Premier League and the Champions League against Brentford and Real Madrid, shipping 7 goals respectively and being comprehensively outplayed across both matches. So, this game has now become really important, sandwiched between the two legs. We really need a confidence-boosting win to take into the second leg. And, it's not completely panic stations, but it's a little bit alarming that we've come back from the international break and we've probably put in 2 of our worst performances of the season. And Thomas Tuchel not really knowing why we're lacking that sharpness and not looking as good as we did before the break. So it's important that we kind of address that and find out what these players are made of. And I'm delighted to be joined by Theo from the Shed End podcast. Mate, great to have you back again. Hope you're well. This game, as I just said, when you looked at the fixtures for this month, you thought, right, Southampton away sandwiched between 2 Real Madrid ties. You thought, okay, it's an important game, but you sort of thought, it might be one you make a few changes in, etc. Should be able to get a result. But having recorded back-to-back defeats, as I said, this game has now become really, really important. And I'd always say it's must win for us.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I mean, last season when it felt like a carbon copy, that Brentford game of the West Brom defeat we had last season. And then we had that Champions League quarter-final against Porto in Sevilla. We won it 2-0 and it kind of allowed us to bounce back, gain a bit more momentum going into the Premier League fixtures. And you kind of hope that was going to be the case of that Real Madrid game. But no, we weren't able to bounce back. And now we've got this opportunity against Southampton. And it's so important. Arsenal, Tottenham, and those teams are breathing down our necks now. We can't afford to drop any more points. And we just need to start winning games soon because we've only got, I think, 7 or 8 more fixtures left in the league. And you'd expect, given the quality that we have in our squad, when they all perform, that this is the type of game we can win. But that being said as well, St. Mary's is a bit of a tricky ground to go and travel to at times. We weren't able to get the win there last season. But no, like I said, a big match, and it's a must-win for us.
I mean, obviously, having won 6 out of 6 in March prior to the international break, Thomas Tuchel himself has come out and said he's not really sure as to why the performance levels have dropped so much, why we're lacking that sharpness, why we can't really find what we had before the break. I mean, why do you think we've come back from the international break and suddenly things seem to have taken a turn for the worse, basically? Very few players performing. And I mean, I don't want to say it's alarming, but I've got to be honest, I'm a little bit concerned now because the season can very quickly unravel. And it's come at a point where this is a really crucial month of Champions League, FA Cup. And I know we feel like we're in the driving seat for a top 4 position, but another couple of poor results in the league, and we suddenly get dragged back into that, and we don't want that. I mean, why do you think we've struggled so much since coming back?
I don't think you can blame fatigue. No. I don't think we can. We've got a fully fit squad as well now, pretty much, except for maybe Hudson-Odoi. We didn't pick up any injuries over that international break. Southgate was brilliant and didn't, allowed us to keep Reece James at Cobham to gain his fitness. You look at City and Arsenal City and Liverpool, their teams are full of international players as well, and they managed to get wins straight after the international break. So why weren't we able to? A small part of me thinks that maybe Tuchel, I think there's talks that he split from his wife over that international break period. Maybe mentally he's still, not really with it at the moment. Even some of his answers he was giving after the Real Madrid game didn't really seem like himself. So maybe tactically as well, he's not really. I think going with a back 4 against Brentford didn't really work out. Maybe not starting Kovacic against Madrid as well was maybe a mistake on his behalf. But no, it just seems to be typical us in a way. As soon as we find a bit of form, we just drop it, and that kind of international break never really helps the situation. I think it was similar to that's what set us off again around November time. After the international break, we were awful again. So, but it's not an excuse. Like I said, it's not an excuse given that other teams have managed to pick up wins after the break with a team of international players as well.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, the international break is definitely not an excuse. I've got to be honest, look, managers can get it wrong, and Tuchel's been fantastic since he's been here. But I've got to be honest, I think kind of lineup-wise, tactics-wise, etc., these last 2 games, he's been exposed by the opposition managers. Thomas Frank, I've got to be honest, I think out-tacticked him. And also Tuchel was a downfall as well a little bit by the back. No, I'm not saying that the back four was wrong. The personnel was all wrong for the back four. We've been playing a back four. We've played a back four a number of times this season. Marcus Alonso has never played left back in a back four for us. Why we've gone with Malang Sarr? Why have we suddenly gone with Alonso? Why was Timo Werner playing? The subs were too late, etc. I thought against Madrid, Carlo Ancelotti definitely out-tacticked him. I mean, obviously you were at the game, but we were so overrun, our two versus their three in midfield. It was almost 3 against 1 at times, with obviously Kante going so far forward. Jorginho was just so exposed in the middle of the park. He got it wrong, admitted it himself. The space between Christensen and Reece James, which Vinicius was exposing time after time. Obviously, there's a lot going on off the pitch with the protracted issue of the sale. That, as Tuchel said, that doesn't affect preparations at Cobham on a daily basis, but it can't be helpful having that in the background. I'm not making that as an excuse because it's not, but that can't be helpful having that there. But yeah, I don't know. These two games really I know Tuchel's got a lot on his plate and his private life as well, and it must be difficult to deal with all that when you've got a family and stuff going through that sort of thing, and you've got to then prepare the side. But having said all that, these last two games, he's got it wrong on both occasions, hasn't he?
Yeah, he has. Like you said, the substitutions coming late, the playing Alonso at left back, Werner as well. I don't know how he started that game against Brentford and why he didn't come off earlier. Loftus-Cheek still playing as a central midfielder alongside a Kante, Jorginho, or Kovacic doesn't really work out. He needs to be played more into his preferred position, which is higher up the pitch. I just feel like I love Tuchel. I always back him. I'll always try to understand why he's playing these types of players or these types of systems or lineups. But like you said, he got it wrong with the last two games, and hopefully he readjusts his tactics and gets it right on Saturday at 3 p.m.
Yeah, but I mean that's the most important thing, But I mean, you see ridiculous things that that Tuchel's under pressure, etc. Like you're always under pressure at Chelsea. Like it doesn't you go 1 or 2 matches without a win, and you're always under pressure. That's just kind of the nature of the football club. But hopefully, kind of that will change because he absolutely is the right man. But I mean, do you think that? I'm just going to bring something up now. In terms of the scheduling, he's obviously not making an excuse, but I'll just bring it up now. Do you think the fact that we've played so many more games this year than a lot of the other sides do you think that's made a big difference?
I feel deep down it does. If you look at how many of those games we played around that November-December period where we had injuries or those fixtures caused those injuries, and we had a squad that was affected by the COVID pandemic in that December period, I feel like it does play a part. There's typical games. I think Wolves away was one of those ones we could have won with a fully fit squad. Everton at home as well. I think it was. I think the Athletic published a chart on how many days, how often we play our games, and we have a game about every 2-3 days. And you compare that to Arsenal, who were playing a game. I think it was on average every 5 or 6 days. It's not fair, really. It is not. It's not fair. And I feel like now Arsenal and Arteta were complaining about how often they're playing their games.
Mate, they play like every 16. They're like their last game before Palace was about 16 days ago.
Literally, yeah. But they're gonna be playing catch up soon because I think a lot of their games. I think that North London derby, for instance, was one of those games that should have been played. I think start of Jan. Yeah, it's now been pushed back. But I do feel like it's slightly unfair. I feel like some of those games could have easily got cancelled, particularly that Wolves one I mentioned, which I know you were at, and that was I think we only had about 4 or 5 outfield players on the bench. But no, I definitely feel like that does play a part. But like I always say, we've got a team of professional footballers that are probably amongst the best footballers in the world. You should still be winning these games, even if you've got a game every 3 days or a game every 5 or 6 days.
And at the end of the day, that's what the squad's for. I know it doesn't help, and I know having the 3 subs makes it a bit more difficult as well. That's obviously going to change for next season, which should make things a bit easier. But he's obviously going on to say that when you face teams like Brentford, Southampton, Crystal Palace, Arsenal, who are not involved in so many games, it's a big challenge, but it's nothing new. It's nothing to look for excuses. That's the way it is when you work and play for Chelsea. Don't get comfortable accepting that it's hard. Embrace it. So he's saying all the right things. Just pointing out kind of the obvious, as it were, but it's not an excuse. When you play for the best football clubs, you're going to be involved in a lot of competitions and you're going to go deep into them. And there's going to be a lot of games. So you just have to adapt to that. I mean, what have you made of Tuchel's, recently in press conferences or in interviews after games? He's almost been channeling his kind of inner Jose as such. He's kind of been not throwing the players under the bus, but, kind of being publicly quite critical, which, I think he's being honest. He speaks how it is, afterwards, it's very emotional straight after a game speaking. And sometimes, you might say things that you perhaps wouldn't say if you had maybe a little bit of time to digest it. But from my point of view, I like it. I think it's refreshing. Obviously, it can go one of two ways, but it's not just down to the manager. The players have got to start taking a bit of responsibility as well.
No, I don't blame Tuchel at times. He's been a bit more, maybe, I want to say maybe it's not the right word, but maybe a bit more aggressive or snappy sometimes in his answers and his interviews. But then again, these reporters and journalists, the way they push his buttons at times, and they try to provoke and kind of get a reaction from him, asking him questions about Abramovich, Ukraine, about the new ownership. That's not up to him to answer. It's not up to him. And I think post Madrid, you could see his frustration. When he was asked about Christensen, and he probably knows for a fact Christensen's leaving to Barcelona, but he can't really give an honest answer there. He has to give the kind of the media trained answer that he's told to say, which is, he's committed to Chelsea for the next 4 or 5 months, whatever it may be. And, he's still a professional footballer, but no, it does seem a bit Jose-esque at times. And we have to remember he is a human being as well. And you will kind of show your frustration and a bit of aggression sometimes when you're provoked in that way. And I do find it almost a bit refreshing as well. We've always seen Tuchel as that person who's always been friendly, always joking about with these reporters. But now it's maybe a bit more of, right, this is the business end of the season. We need to get stuff done. And that's kind of the answers he's been given. But I don't blame him. I don't blame him one bit at all.
No, 100%, mate. And as you say, it's not, like the players have to take responsibility as well. Mm-hmm, yes,
exactly.
The manager picks the side, does the tactics, etc. But once the players are out on the pitch, it's their responsibility. And too many of them have not been performing in recent weeks, particularly the last 2 games. I think it's exposed a lot of players that actually, if we're being really honest, aren't good enough to play for Chelsea and probably don't deserve to be at the club. Or there's a lot of players that don't deserve to be in the starting lineup in the moment that seem to find themselves in there. One thing that we've prided ourselves on this season, mate, is we've been very strong defensively. Last 2 games, we've really struggled at the back. It's probably 2 of the worst defensive performances we've had since Thomas Tuchel's been in. He's spoken about it today in the presser about the defensive struggles. He said it would be surprising if we had a lack of confidence. First match, we were 1-up. And suddenly the goals were very different that we can see. We defended the last matches in a back 4 to not be pinned with too many people in a defence. Anything can have an influence. I don't have one answer. Some of the goals are individual behaviour, little groups, and determination/investment in defence. How many sprints? Sometimes if you're not protected, if you don't win it here, we lose a goal. Maybe we had this mentality. Every little challenge matters. One, what do you make of that? And 2, why do you feel we've struggled so much defensively in these last 2 games? Because it has kind of come out of the blue a little bit, really. It's not really been that much of a problem this season defensively. And if we were going to maintain a title challenge, it was very much going to be built on being solid at the back rather than being able to outscore teams.
Yeah, we started the season so solidly defensively. And then throughout that kind of unbeaten run we had in January, February, and March, again, we were solid defensively, clean sheets away against Newcastle, away to Palace. So some brilliant performances defensively, but the last 2 games against Brentford and Real Madrid, 7 goals conceded. It's very unlike us. We were talking right before the recording, but players like Rudiger and Silva, who are world-class defenders, look like a shadow of themselves. They really underperformed in those games. Mendy as well was very, very poor, I felt, in both those games. Maybe the back 4 against Brentford didn't help. I thought that was all wrong. We know Alonso in a left-back position, he doesn't really perform like he does when he plays the left wing back. That was a mistake, I think, on Tuchel's behalf. The space that was left between Christensen and James in that Real Madrid game was awful. James should have really been a lot closer to Christensen and not allow Vinicius all that, that pocket of space which he had at times. And then again, these are things maybe you don't know if they're just little blips in performance or if they're, our tactics are maybe people have they know how to play against us now, but you'd really hope we can refine that defensive quality that we had, earlier in the season, starting tomorrow, because we can't afford to concede any of these stupid goals again. And that Brentford game, they were scary. Just every time they were in the box, they just felt like they were going to score. Pretty much the same with Madrid, actually. Every time they had a chance, they could have scored, and they should have scored more than 3. They hit the crossbar, they forced Mendy into a save. Benzema put it wide at one point. I wouldn't have been surprised if the final score was 5 or 6-1.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, like, and these last two games are kind of taking us back sort of almost to the dark days under Lampard, where we just used to let in sort of 3-4 goals pretty much every game. And I mean, for me, it's a worry as a collective that, all of the defenders seem to be out of form in these last two games, not just one of them in the three, but all three, coupled with the wing backs as well, or the full backs in whatever system we're playing in. And that is a little bit of a cause for concern. Yes, you're not going to keep clean sheets or only let one goal in every game. You are going to have the odd game where you might let in 3 or 4, but to have it back to back against, no disrespect, against Brentford, a newly promoted side at home, it's almost inexcusable, really. Yes, you can lose to Real Madrid, of course. But it's for me, it's the manner of these losses. As a football fan, you know that your side's going to lose matches, and you might lose 2 in a row, you might lose 3 in a row. But there's losing and then there's losing. And, it's not like we've played well in either of these games, We've played awfully in both games. And that for me is a slightly bigger concern heading into Southampton, which, as you said earlier, mate, it's not an easy place to go, St Mary's. We didn't win there last season. We're bang out of form. And it's almost probably one of the places that you probably wouldn't pick to go to when you're in desperate need of a result. What do you think needs to change, mate, from the last 2 games for us to get a positive result at Southampton on Saturday? Because, I mean, there's quite a few things that do need to change from my perspective, but I just can't see. It might seem a bit negative. We're normally really positive on the channel, but I can't see how from the last 2 games and the 3 days since Real Madrid, how there's going to be a drastically better performance on Saturday.
No. You probably also think the players maybe were given a day off, maybe Wednesday, or they didn't.
On Thursday, yeah.
Thursday, sorry.
Yeah.
It's something needs to change. Like you said, I think if we play anywhere to the level we played against Brentford or Madrid, Southampton will get the 3 points easily. So something needs to change. I think, like I mentioned, if we play with left wing backs again, they need to be a lot more closer to the centre backs. If it's Christensen, whoever it is, or James, they need to be close together. They need to communicate a lot better, I feel. And offensively as well. I mean, we can point the fingers to all the defenders and the goalkeeper and the wing backs, but offensively, we need to be more clinical, which is, I've been saying this all season. Yeah. When we're given these chances, we need to score them. I feel like a lot of times we're playing with our backs to goal and we're not really taking those risks of driving into the penalty box, doing that one little bit of pass or killer pass that can maybe get us a goal. We seem to be playing this very conservative and protective football. I think maybe that changed slightly in that Madrid game when Kovacic and Loftus-Cheek came on. They did provide a bit of that dynamism and drive that we needed in midfield, but starting the game strongly as well. We need to give 100% from the moment the game kicks off. And like I said, we just can't afford any stupid defensive mistakes. We really can't afford that. Against Brentford, I thought the mistakes were that we were too committed up the pitch. They scored quite a few on the counter. And against Real Madrid, it was just leaving players unmarked and those pockets of space for their wingers. So we can't afford that as well. So just be a lot more compact defensively as well. Yeah,
no, 100%. And obviously, Southampton got some good players, the likes of James Ward-Prowse. Obviously, Che Adams has been in good form for them. Brozier, who obviously has been scoring a fair few goals for them, doing very well. Luckily for us, he won't be able to play. Because obviously of the conditions of the loan deal. So that, I suppose, that helps us out slightly in that respect. But I mean, it doesn't necessarily make the task that much easier, as you said. An area of real concern for me, not just the defence, but the midfield's been an issue as well now for a while. And I think, it's been on the cards for a while. There's some big decisions to be made in midfield. Obviously, the guys out on loan, and the fact that Kante and Jorginho are both out of contract at the end of next season, there's some big decisions to be made there. But I think the last 2 games have really exposed the fact that we are desperate for a holding midfielder. So someone to play alongside Kovacic, because for whatever reason, I don't understand why, Kovacic is our best midfield player. Simple as that for me. Most effective. He does what none of the other midfielders do. And yet, he's found himself barely starting recently. I mean, I can't make sense of that. I mean, why do you feel, mate, that he's not started very much recently?
Yeah, I know that Tuchel, I think he said he didn't even consider that the Chelsea Real Madrid game that happened last season when picking his team or his tactics. I feel deep down he must have, because I think he picked the same partnership of Kante, Jorginho,
Yeah.
who started both those games. And last season they were brilliant in the game, the ties against Madrid. But on Wednesday night, both Kante and Jorginho were pretty awful. And Kante coming off at half time is not something you see often. So something must have gone wrong with the tactics or his performance. Yeah, Jorginho, a brilliant pass to Havertz for the goal, but otherwise he was just chasing shadows for most of the game. I really hope Kovacic does start tomorrow. And like you said, should the sanctions be lifted, it could be an area of improvement, whether it's Gallagher who plays there, but that's not really his main position. But I think the logical kind of players you maybe look at are Declan Rice and Aurelien Tchouameni from Monaco as well. But it definitely seems to be like an area we might need to strengthen in, because Jorginho and Kante are only getting older, and they're getting closer to their contract expiry dates as well.
And they're both not playing well at all. I mean, I've got to be honest, but I was surprised that say surprised. I mean, obviously, if you're looking at Madrid last year, Jorginho was great in both games, as was Kante. So it kind of, you sort of thought, well, it's kind of obviously going to be that. But Jorginho, before that Madrid game, he hadn't started the last few games. He'd been unused sub in a few matches as well. And there's something just chuck him back in for our biggest game of the season when his confidence is probably quite low, his form isn't great. I thought that was maybe slightly strange over Kovacic, but he never seems to play Kovacic and Kante together very often at all. But I mean, a more alarming thing for me is the, I don't want to say demise, but I guess for want of a better word, I'll roll with it. The demise of Kante's form. You know, a massive, Chelsea's biggest game of the season, and for N'Golo Kante to be subbed at half time is almost unheard of. I think it's the first time he's been subbed at half time for anything other than an injury. You know, he was awful. He was really dreadful. And I mean, Tuchel was asked about this in the press today, and he wasn't really sure why Kante was form had dipped. Mate, it's quite alarming, isn't it? You know, compared to what we've come to expect from Kante, what we've seen in the past. He's put in the odd good performance this season, but more often than not, you know, he's become a lot more inconsistent. He's picking up a lot more injuries, and I hate to say it, but there's a big decision to be made this summer. Do we sell him? Do we offer him a new contract, or do we risk losing him for nothing at the end of next season?
I do feel like it's a bit harsh to point out Kante's performance in particular, because I feel every single player underperformed, other than maybe Havertz. But I think when it's those midfield players, there's a lot more apparent, because they're kind of that link from defense to attack. And like you said, they really struggled on Wednesday night. I still think Kante brings so much, even in the quarterfinals against Lille, particularly that first leg, he was immense. But that is Lille, you'd expect that maybe. Maybe, I don't know if it's an injury maybe played a part. Being subbed at halftime, that's often indicates that the player is not fully fit. But then in Tuchel's presser just now, he said that the only injuries are Hudson-Odoi and apparently Ziyech and Lukaku are doubts for tomorrow. So which indicates that Kante is fit. I would stick with Kante. Definitely I would. We know what he can bring when he's on form, but he's definitely not as maybe consistent as he used to be back in maybe these earlier seasons at Chelsea.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, to be honest, mate, you look at it at the moment, and I think realistically, there's probably only 3 or 4 players that definitely deserve to be starting for Chelsea. And probably say that's Reece James, Thiago Silva and Rudiger, Kai Havertz, and Mateo Kovacic. For me, those 5 are probably the only ones that you can say they should definitely be in the team. The rest, all right, you could maybe add Mendy to that. I know the last 2 games have been poor, but, you know, he's got credit in the bank for sure. So you can probably add him to the list. But other than that, you know, the third slot in the back 3 is up for grabs. That left wing back or left back positions up for grabs. There's places up for grabs in midfield. And there's certainly places up for grabs in the front 3 as well. I mean, it's quite, yeah. So, I mean, I'm concerned about how many players are out of form at the moment, having come back from the international break. But, you know, I know we say we've got a good squad, but it's very unbalanced. You actually look at it and you think, oh, there's not that many options really that we've got. So, yeah, I mean, picking the lineup is going to be difficult for Southampton. He's probably going to have half an eye on Madrid on Tuesday. Even if he says he doesn't, he's bound to. And you then think, well, hang on a second, we desperately need to win this game. What changes can I actually make? It's going to be tough.
I'd have to agree with that list of players you mentioned who are maybe guaranteed starters, who are the ones who have really justified starting games this season. But I think what worries me the most is all those other players you didn't list, is their consistency. They only kind of perform in kind of patches this season. And I think Tuesday, I mean, I wouldn't do our predicted lineups now, but I think Tuchel will have one eye on Madrid. So I wouldn't be surprised if players like maybe Chalobah or Loftus-Cheek even start again.
I mean, I've brought the lineup up here. We've seen a back four against Brentford. We saw back four in the second half against Real Madrid. I've got it up as a back five. I mean, this is our lineup, what we'd like to see. I mean, mate, are you expecting a back five, or do you think we could see the back four again?
I think given that maybe those two players that I mentioned are doubts, Lukaku and Ziyech, probably force us to be a bit more defensive in terms of the way we line up. So I would stick with a back five for sure. But I'm going to be quite controversial with the player I say as my left wing back, I think.
Fair. Obviously, team news, as you briefly touched on, Callum Hudson-Odoi, Thomas Tuchel saying that's not looking like days, it's looking more like weeks. Ben Chilwell, obviously long-term absentee. And then he says that Lukaku and Ziyech are doubts. Lukaku has a bit of pain in his Achilles, which is why he missed training yesterday. No update on that. I'm sure he'll be fit enough to play some part. I think Hakim Ziyech has got a bit of a knock, but you'd expect them to feature. They might not start, but you would expect them to probably feature. I presume between the sticks, I know he's had two tough games, but there's no indication that Thomas Tuchel's going to drop Edouard Mendy. So you'd fully expect him to continue in goal. I mean, Tuchel on Mendy was saying it's the life of a goalkeeper on a high level. It's a special position in football. You are in the spotlight. When you are so successful like Edu, you are even more in the spotlight. He was never fully free of mistakes. We helped him be better, sometimes more lucky. Of course, he can solve this situation much better. He knows it's bad timing to do it in a match like Madrid. He goes on saying, I hope it doesn't affect his self-confidence too much. It's about accepting and living with mistakes to refocus, stay calm and confident. Now he can prove that he's a true champion. Obviously, the manager backs him, but Mendy needs a really good game, doesn't he, tomorrow, or just a game that's free of mistakes? Because otherwise, if you make a mistake or you have a poor game, and that's 3 in a row, suddenly you're thinking, well, maybe not the fans, but like you start getting media speculation, maybe some section of the fan base saying, hang on a second, maybe there's a choice to be made here.
Yeah, and like when Kepa does play, he often justifies why he's good enough to be our first choice at times. But I would stick with Mendy 100% tomorrow. Yeah. He's still a world-class goalkeeper. Like I mentioned, he just needs to improve his distribution and his footwork. And it is the perfect game to regain a bit of confidence, build that momentum, hopefully pull off some good saves, get a clean sheet as well. And then be between the sticks at the Bernabeu on Tuesday night as well.
Yeah, 100%. But as I said, it's crucial that he has an error-free game tomorrow, not just for himself, but for the team as well, and obviously for his own confidence, and to perhaps avoid any questions about whether he should suddenly be starting or not. Back three we're going to go with. I presume two of them, Rudiger and Thiago Silva, pick themselves. The third one's interesting. I suppose we've got options, haven't we? I mean, it could we potentially maybe see Malang Sarr? Will he continue with Christensen after his poor performance against Real Madrid? Could we see Azpilicueta drop into there? And I don't know what's happened to Chalobah in the last few games. I mean, I don't think he's injured. I just don't think he's been used. What are you expecting to see in that back three? Or what would you like to see?
I would actually be surprised if maybe Tuchel rests Silva for the Madrid game. Yeah. He's been playing a lot of football recently, but that being said, it is such an important game to us, so we need to maybe start him. I'd play Chalobah as the third centre back. Yeah. I think he's been rested. He didn't, obviously he wasn't picked for the international break, so he's probably got a lot of fuel in the tank. And then I think maybe if he plays well, he can start on. He can potentially start on Tuesday, because I don't think Christensen's performance on Wednesday justified him starting tomorrow or again in the second leg. And I think I'll give Azpi a break as well, potentially. He's been playing a lot of football lately. He travelled with Spain to play their qualifiers or friendlies. So obviously I think James would be the other option at right wing back.
Yeah, I would agree, man. I think it's a Chalobah game. I mean, I wouldn't completely rule out seeing Malang Sarr potentially, but I think Chalobah definitely would get the nod over Christensen for me. Reece James kind of obviously going to play at right wing back. If he's fit, he plays. He's really important to the team. Not really much more to add on him. Left wing back then, we saw Azpilicueta play there against Real Madrid. Marcos Alonso, I think, in my opinion, rightfully dropped after that performance against Brentford. Admittedly, it wasn't a flat back four, but it wasn't good enough, if we're being perfectly honest. Do you think he could be returned to the lineup? Could we see maybe Saul called out return from the cold? Or could we see Azpilicueta continue there again? What do you think? Or what would you like to see?
I think Azpi needs a break. He needs a break. Yeah. We need to remember that I think he's 33 now, 32 maybe, but he needs a break. He's been playing a lot of football, like I just mentioned. Left wing back, our only natural left wing back player is Alonso. However, like I said, sometimes when you do play Alonso, you don't know what you're getting, particularly in that defensive side. So I think this is the type of game. I'm not sure what you're going to think about this, but I'd play Kennedy.
Oh, I mean, yeah. I mean, it's definitely a left field shout for someone that's not, played since Luton in the cup.
Yeah, but he wasn't too bad against Luton, and he offer.
He wasn't too bad, but I mean, realistically, in a must-win game, are we going to really see?
It is a must-win. That's why.
A must-win. And the fact he's barely been involved at all would suggest to me that it's probably going to be unlikely. Other than Kennedy, mate, I've got to be honest. I think Alonso will be restored to the lineup.
Yeah, like I said about Mendy, it's that type of game that can maybe restore your confidence if you have a good performance. So I think it is the game maybe that Alonso does start, but I would not be surprised seeing that Tuchel that has tinkered with his lineups lately, that we see in maybe a Saul at left wing back. But I think Alonso is probably the natural and best decision for that position.
Yeah, I would agree. Moving into midfield then, obviously Jorginho and Kante started in the week. Ruben Loftus-Cheek came on, Kovacic came on at half-time. From those four, what combination are you expecting? For me, Mateo Kovacic has to start. It's as simple as that. So I think we can obviously agree on that. He's our most important player. When he doesn't play, you know what's missing, and the energy he brings, the driving forward that he brings, and he can pick out a pass as well. So, I mean, if he doesn't start, I don't know what I'm gonna do when the team news comes out. It'll just be getting to a point where it'd actually be ridiculous. Moving on to partnering him then. Obviously, we've kind of talked about N'Golo Kante. We don't tend to see Kovacic and Kante that often because for whatever reason, Tuchel doesn't like to have Kante as the sitter in the 2 or in the 3 or whatever. But what do you think? Do you think it'll be Kante, or would you like to see Kante in there? Or do you think actually, we should maybe take him out the firing line, give him a rest, give him some minutes on the bench to make sure he's fully fit and firing for Madrid and the Bernabeu? I mean, I'd personally probably continue with Jorginho, but I mean, what are your thoughts?
I'm literally 50-50 whether it's Jorginho or Kante. I think, like we said, it's a must-win game. Kante, when he does play well, he's one of our big game players. That being said, Jorginho and Kovacic, I think our win rate with that midfield partnership is, I think, the highest. So it could be a type of game you give Kante a small break and maybe bring him off the bench if we just need to keep that lead that we may have. So I'm happy to go with either Kante or Jorginho. I'm very 50-50, like I said. I'll let you choose.
Do you think there's any chance Ruben plays? He's been involved a bit more, started against, obviously, Brentford, didn't have a great game, came on against Real Madrid in difficult circumstances. I actually thought he did okay. Do you think there's a case for him, or is it very much between Jorginho and Kante?
I think Ruben's type of player you bring off the bench maybe if we're really chasing the game. But I'd rather just, like I said, it's such an important game. We can't make too many changes. So I think Jorginho, Kante, and I think, like I say, Kova and Jorginho's got such a good win rate together in midfield. So let's stick with that.
Yeah, I'd go with that. I think I'd personally take Kante out the firing line, but if he does start, I don't think it's a massive issue. But I think he could benefit with having a bit of a break. Moving into the front three, then Hakim Ziyech is a doubt, so I guess we could maybe presume that with that he might not start. Having said that, there's not a lot of other options. Timo Werner, as far as I'm concerned, shouldn't be anywhere near the starting lineup at the moment. Hudson-Odoi is injured. I mean,
it's got to be the same front three that we played against.
Mate, it leaves Mason Mount.
It's got to be, Mount, Pulisic,
Mount's been, what have you made of Mount recently? Obviously, he's had a good season. He's got good goal and assist numbers, but I think just generally, definitely in the last 2 games and just in general, even over the international break, he was poor when he played for England. He's not been in good form. And, I think it's important that players are held to the same standard when being criticised, and no one's immune from criticism. And Mount has not delivered in the last 2 games. He's been missing.
He's been very poor.
What have you made of him? And do you think he's going to start again tomorrow? Maybe just because of lack of options, he might.
I think he's one of those other players that would benefit from a break, maybe. But at the same time, we can't afford to. We don't have many options in that position. We could potentially play with Loftus-Cheek as one of the wingers, or behind a striker, or even as a false 9, maybe. But for the same reasons, I picked Mendy and Alonso just to regain a bit of confidence, maybe get a goal or an assist. It is a good game for him to do that, and I think he's got good, decent stats against Southampton, if I'm not mistaken, when he has played against them. So I think Mount just because it only leaves us with either Barkley, Loftus-Cheek, or Werner, and I don't even want to mention those type of players. So let's stick with Mount.
Yeah, let's stick with Mount. I mean, I've got a feeling that if Ziyech is fit, he'll probably start. I really wouldn't be surprised. Left-hand side then, I mean, do you think we could see a situation where perhaps we see Pulisic on the bench, Havertz shifted to the left, and maybe Lukaku plays down the middle? I've got to be honest, I was really surprised Lukaku didn't start against Brentford, and I was surprised that, he didn't come on sooner against Madrid. He's not been in the best of form. Tuchel's, saying that, it's not just, it's not only Romelu. The group is lacking shape and sharpness. It's a lack of form from individuals, and it affects the group. Romelu had one chance and a big chance. Nothing helps more than goals. The best thing now is to take training seriously. Do you think Lukaku has got a possibility of starting this game?
He's a
sort of game you might start him in.
It is a sort of game you could start him in, but given what Tuchel just said in his presser and mentioned that he is a doubt, it wouldn't surprise me if he does start, because a doubt basically means he could do, he couldn't. But based on what he said and the fact that he's a doubt, he'll either be on the bench or might not even feature at all. So again, I think it's one of these type of games we'll see Havertz as a false nine. Well, I say false nine, but I think he's made that position his own now, so he'll be the striker.
Yeah, let's pop Kai Havertz in there. I mean, then do you just think it's going to be Christian Pulisic then?
I think so. Purely based on the fact that we don't have any options based on the players that are doubts and the other players that just have really been underperforming more than Pulisic and Mount. So I think that's going to be the front three.
Yeah, I mean, there's not many other options. I mean, if Lukaku's fit, we potentially see Havertz rested or maybe shunted out to the left-hand side. In place of Pulisic. Or we may see Ziyech come in for Mount. Or Tuchel could surprise us and go with a completely different formation. We could see a 3-5. We could see 3-5-2. We could see a partnership of Lukaku and Havertz maybe. I mean, you just don't know what you're going to get. But, I mean, with Lukaku and Ziyech being doubts, you'd maybe have to say that we may persist with the same front three. But to be honest, mate, as long as we win this game, I don't care who scores the goals. I don't care. The performance is not that great either. We just need to get the win to get some confidence back on the board. But, I mean, we'll go with that. I mean, it doesn't look too bad there. It's not awful. But, when you're out of form, you suffer back-to-back heavy defeats, I just worry if we concede the first goal tomorrow, what that might do for our confidence. I think it's vitally important that we don't concede first and we get an early goal just to perhaps settle the nerves. So the longer it goes on scoreless, you just worry that the nerves might creep in and we could... when you're making mistakes, they seem to occur quite often. We just don't want that to happen. But
we can't afford to give them any silly free kicks around our penalty box.
No, yeah, mate.
It's basically like giving them a penalty with Ward-Prowse, isn't it?
Yeah, no, mate, it 100% is. I'm just not sure what to expect. But hopefully those guys can get the job done. Guys, obviously, let us know your thoughts in the chat and in the comments if you agree or disagree with our lineup. I mean, there's bound to be some changes. I'd personally start Lukaku if he's fit to go. And maybe I'd start Hakim Ziyech as well if he was fit, but they're doubts at the moment. So taking that into account, we've gone with them probably either not making it or starting on the bench. Last thing then, mate, score prediction for tomorrow. It's going to be a tricky game. What are you going with?
I've got a bit of a pessimistic approach to this one. I'm going to say 1-1. I don't think we'll bounce back. I hope we will bounce back, but I can't see us, making those changes within been only 3 days. So I'm going to say 1-1. Yeah,
I was going to say that, but just for the sake of being different, I'll say that we're going to just get a scrappy 1-0. But okay. I mean, I do think there's a high chance we do drop points in this game, and just based on our current form. But yeah, I mean, 1-0 is what I'd like to say, but realistically, I think it's probably going to be a draw. But yeah, that rounds out the stream then. Theo, thanks so much for joining me, mate. Guys, make sure you check out Theo's YouTube channel as well. Subscribe to that. It's linked in the description. Follow them on socials. I've linked all the accounts below, so make sure you go and check those out and give them a follow. From myself, guys, make sure you smash a like on this video. Please do subscribe to the channel. Really appreciate all of your support. It takes seconds and it really helps me out, so please do that. And yeah, big game for Chelsea at St Mary's tomorrow, heading down to the South Coast. Anything other than 3 points is really not good enough. We really need to bounce back from these back-to-back defeats, and I'll catch you in the match reaction tomorrow. So until then, enjoy the rest of your Friday. Have a great weekend and up the Chelsea.